Good morning, everyone. We are live. Yep, all right. So we're live. How's it going? I have the chat here with me, so if you have any questions or just wanna pop by and say hi, I will be able to see it. Cool. Alrighty. So today I'm just gonna get straight into it because I wanna start working on something new. Last week we did a bit of a VDM process. I should have mentioned that it's easier to do it with the chisel brush. So I did it with the standard brush, and then I remember that the chisel brushes are already all the settings are ready for a VDM. So if you're struggling with creating a VDM that looks good from the previous stream, just use chisel brushes. Just use any of these chisel 3D. It's gonna give you a much better result. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. And today I want to work on some hard surface stuff. So kind of like a mecha character design, just because it's something that I don't usually do in ZBrush like from scratch. I usually bring stuff and polish it in ZBrush, but from ZBrush I don't do much, so I might as well just do something different. That's the whole point of doing this as well. Also, let me see. I don't know if you if you guys follow my Instagram and those social media stuff. I posted that I'm going to create, or I'm working on a introductory series to Gravity Sketch, which is one of the softwares that I'm working on right now or using in VR. And it has a really nice workflow because then you can export the OBJ from that VR software into ZBrush and then continue there. So it kind of like makes sense or is related to what I'm going to be doing today. But rather than starting sketching in 3D, maybe what I'll do is just start working on a 2D sketch in ZBrush, just to have a quick idea of what to do, maybe. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. Alright, so I have just a quick sketch opened and I have symmetry enabled. I'm also going to lock in my camera so that I don't move things around. So this is just an empty canvas, and I'm just gonna sketch out some ideas here of what this mecha could be. To be honest, this is just it's gonna be just a thumbnail, but just having something to kind of like aim for is good. Or at least I use these tiny sketches or tiny thumbnails to give me a sense of balance of the details, because when I'm doing something with hard surface modeling, although I'm not, I'm not a hard surface guy, I don't know all the inside outs and all the tricks. And therefore my hard surface designs are not necessarily the best, I would say, but these little thumbnails give me a quick reference of where I can put the details, because again, in ZBrush it's so easy to do details that you can get lost just doing that. And I don't know if the chat is working, to be honest. If you guys can see me and hear me all right, please just let me know in the chat, because I'm not. I know that some of the other Pixologic streaming artists are having some troubles in the past few days with the streaming software. I don't know if it's a thing that has been fixed. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, just wanted to double check that it was working. Alright, I'm not sure if this is going anywhere. But again, it's just to have a quick reference. I'm actually going to change my brush. Just make it softer. There we go. Not happy with this. I'm gonna do another one. I think I'm gonna go for a simple kind of like, yeah, simple mecha robot with some details. And this front part, this front piece of the helmet or the face, it's kind of like, I don't know, simple plate or a simple visor. And you know, I like to make things feel a bit more organic, like this type of mecha stuff. And working with symmetry allows you to just explore things very quickly. What if we make something like that? Well, that's maybe too obvious. All right. And also with this quick sketch in ZBrush, it's just really easy to get some values going, so you can at least begin to understand a little bit of the volumes, or like give some depth to this sketch. And this is something that I do often, just as a quick practice. So bear with me. I know I know, I mean, it is still ZBrush, right? But it's not necessarily sculpting. But we'll get to that. Let me see the chat. Cool. Yes, okay. Peter, hey Pablo, where can I find your tutorials? The tutorials about ZBrush. Yeah. So if you go to the ZBrush Guides website, there you can find all of the stuff that I share. It's basically just a hub for online, you know, an online hub for resources and ZBrush stuff. It's mostly catered to ZBrush material. If you want something a little bit more in depth, like other type of, you know, training courses and that sort of thing, I also have a website called the 3D Concept Artist, although it's pretty new, so we're in the process of updating it, but that's where I'm gonna add a few of the stuff that are not like as ZBrush centric. So yeah, so the short answer is ZBrush Guides for all the ZBrush stuff. Also 3D Concept Artist website is another one that you might find useful. In fact, I once Pixologic uploads all of the streams to their channel, I put it into the ZBrush Guides website as well. So if you go to the ZBrush Guides website, you'll find a link at the top menu that says ZBrush Live Sessions, and there you can filter by kind of like category or topic. So I have some tags in there, so you can just filter the different streams, because otherwise it might be a little bit hard to, you know, to get to know which what topic is being discussed in each stream. This looks like nice. I don't like this. All right. I think I'm just doing a bit of this Rorschach effect. So let's just remove that a bit. Okay, I'm gonna just do a quick refinement of this, quick sketch, keep it on my references, and yeah, we can start working on something, an approximation of this thing. It's just, you know, a quick thing. As a reference, like I said, nothing too specific, just to get an idea roughly of what this could be. But that's the beauty of sketching with ZBrush, right? You can change things on the fly. Although, you know, just working with these values like this, and from large to small brushes, it also gives you, it feels almost like you're sculpting, really. If you start thinking about it as you know, just values, black and white, and thinking about the depth of this character, it's almost like you're sculpting. All right, I'm just gonna do a quick screenshot of that. I'll check the chat in just a second. So I'm gonna use this snip and sketch thingy, and I'm just gonna copy this and paste it just somewhere else. Cool. All right. So this is just a tool that is created by ZBrush, right? So I can just move away, and it's just a plane that is being set up. So in case you didn't know, this is a quick sketch that's within ZBrush. I don't remember where sketch it is though, so I think it's within document or draw maybe. I've had it for so long in this UI that I don't remember where it is. There's a way to find out. If you hold the Alt key and click on whatever button you want, it's gonna bring in the palette where that button is. So there you go. sketch, quick sketch. Sorry. So there it is. It's just a plugin. So yeah, again, if you forget, if you have your custom UI and then you want to find out the palette where a button belongs to, you can hold the Alt key and click on anything, and it will bring up that palette. So let's say edit spotlight, right? Well, that's a macro actually. The clear button, right? If I hold the Alt key and click on clear, it's gonna bring in the color palette where the clear button is, which is the equivalent to Control N. So just a little something, little extra there. Alrighty. So, hey Chris, how's it going? Did your 5-day challenge? Great. Glad to hear. The 5-day challenge is back up. So if you already have the links to it, the links are the same from the emails. Cool. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start with these, just blocking some stuff up. So for that, what I'll do is I'm gonna bring in just a single sphere, change my materials, make it a polymesh 3D, make sure I have symmetry enabled, and I'm gonna select the move brush. Alright, this is gonna be the head of the character. I'm gonna just create a quick block out of kind of like the chest and the neck, or what would be the neck. So I'm going to duplicate this, and this is something that I've been doing lately. It's quite an easy way to block out things, which is basically duplicating a tool, going to the Gizmo 3D, going to the cog icon, and just select you know, a different mesh. Oh, this is tiny. Hang on. There we go. And this one allows you to just change the topology on the fly, so it's pretty convenient. So I'm gonna leave it as it is. Rotate around. I'm gonna go for a very thin neck just because I'm gonna add a lot of stuff on top, so that's kind of like an additive process, and obviously it will make it, you know, feel a little bit thicker. Okay, let's do the same thing. I'm gonna duplicate that, move it down. I'm gonna change that to be a let's just keep it simple, to a sphere, and we can just scale it. All right. We can also use other deformers like the taper deformer. So taper, sorry, forgot to accept this. Hang on, what am I doing wrong? Gizmo 3D, there we go. For the head though, let me just do a quick blocking of this guy. I'm probably going to change everything together. I'm used to this process. I know there is a different way to do it, but I'm used to this process, so I'm gonna just do it with the transpose master. I'm gonna unify it and send it back. All right, that was just to unify all of this and keep everything separately. Okay, so the process the way that I approach this hard surface modeling stuff is pretty much the same thing as if I were doing just a creature or any other thing. It's just the polishing is different, but the blocking stages and how the language, the visual language and the forms relate to each other and how you can read it is essentially the same for me. So all right, so now that I have this the head, what I'm going to do is use another deformer that is pretty awesome. I'm going to change the material just so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I have symmetry enabled. I'm going to go into solo mode. I'm going to leave the polyframe on, and I'm going to bring in the gizmo center without symmetry, center that. There we go. And the one that I like to use for this type of mecha stuff, to at least blocking the primary forms, is the project primitive. So this is a slightly complex deformer that has a lot of controllers, but it's really handy. It's really useful and really powerful stuff. If you want to know more about this, like a more in-depth explanation of this, there is a dedicated ZBrush guide in the ZBrush guides website, a dedicated tutorial on how to use this specific deformer. But basically it allows you to just change things very quickly. So I'm going to push this forward and I'm going to change the primitive to a different shape. So let's go for something sharper like that. Just going to move this down, and this is going to be kind of like that bottom piece of the face or the helmet. This one is also pretty handy to, you know, block out other stuff, organic stuff, not just mechas. And I'm going to play around with the opacity and the blend and the opacity. All right, and then if I click on the white one, this white controller is going to accept this. So just pressing what? Now I have another primitive being projected. So I'm gonna push this forward, make it smaller, maybe play with the opacity, just make it fully, you know, get the full influence of this. And I'm just gonna, not necessarily trying to get any paneling or anything, just working a little bit on the shapes again. and obviously all of this is going to change quite a bit. Just want to get some of the main shapes right. I'm going to get to the accept that again with the white controller. You can also click on the cog icon and click on reset, and it's going to reset the kind of like the pivot and the main object that you're using to project. So we can go ahead and use this again. Let's turn down the opacity and the blend. So this could be kind of like for the back of the head. Here's another thing that I really like about this this process. You can change the tessellation. So this is just a normal sphere, right? But we already been tessellating stuff. With this green controller, you can just increase or decrease the amount of tessellation to add or remove polygons. So that is okay. Let's go ahead and do another one. So I'm gonna accept this one, and this is another cool tool. Let's go ahead and do a full reset. Full reset is not going to reset only the mesh that you're projecting. Is going to reset the whole thing as if you're starting over. So full reset. Now you should have the sphere. This is sphere, and here you have symmetry in the different axes. So if I enable +1, now I have symmetry in both axes, and I can start working with this sort of stuff. So just gonna scale this up, push it in, lower, and then you see you have these white little dots. That is going to flatten whatever deformer you're using, whatever object you're using to deform, and it's going to flatten that in a specific angle. So I can just do this sort of thing, right? So it's super powerful stuff, and you can create these things very quickly. Let me just check the chat. Peter, hey Pablo, will you be doing a live session on creating skin alphas? I know these resources are available online, but to learn the theory behind skin and how to make it myself. What I'm planning to do is take the resources that I have, and I will show you basically how to use those. Because it comes with the resources come with a what's the name? with a quick guide, but it's not necessarily, you know, self-explanatory. If you're not like an experienced artist to using those tools, it might be a little bit hard. So what I'll do is just explain how I use those. So I'm just trying to set up another object here. Let's go for a rounded shape. So 0.5 and 0.5 should give me sphere. So 0 and 0.5 will give me something like that. Okay, so this is really what I'm looking for. So I'll get to the chat in a second. I just wanted to show you another thing that this deformer does is that you can actually subtract pieces. So if you, let's say, decrease the opacity and decrease the blend, so it has a very sharp cylinder in this case, like this. As long as you go outside of the bounding box, again, if you want a clearer or more in-depth explanation, you can have a look at the ZBrush guides. But basically, if you get out this center point of whatever mesh is being deformed, being used as deformer, if you take that out of this bounding box of the entire mesh, it's going to subtract. So this is the middle point of this little cylinder that I'm projecting, the yellow thing. If I take this center point out of this main bounding box, is going to subtract. So if I push this out, you see it's adding, boom, subtracting. So I can use this to generate these holes as well. Obviously this is too much, but you get the idea. You can just flatten areas just doing that. All right, let's go ahead and do a full reset. Oh, sorry, let me accept this. Let's do a full reset now, and I just want to do something here in the at the top. And for that, what I'll do is I'm going to scale all this up quite a bit, and then I'm going to use these dots to flatten things on both sides. So if you click one, it gives you the effect that I showed you before. If you hold the shift key, it's going to do it in both sides. So click and shift, it gives you kind of like this this effect. And this could be kind of like an interesting thing for the visor. So I'm gonna push this like so, push this forward a bit, give it kind of like dolphin or beluga whale type of head, which I think could be interesting. And yeah, let's go ahead and click and accept that. So you see, very sketchy, nothing like too set in stone. This is just the beginning to get an idea of like the blocking of this character or whatever this mecha is going to be, and then we start adding stuff on top of it, and you know, fine tuning the shapes and all that, like exactly the same as I would do any creature stuff. YouTube titles, are you Shane Olsen? Hey Francisco, yeah, I don't know. Is it Shane? I can pretend to be him, but I don't know if this style would pass as a Shane Olsen style. Sorry. Check stream name in YouTube. Hey Alex. Is the little creature we make on the 5-day challenge your design? Yeah. Well, yeah. The creatures in the 5-day challenge are my design, except obviously the baby Yoda, because that's kind of like a fan art. Obviously, that's something that I did for, you know, for the frenzy of the baby Yoda stuff. A lot of people wanted to, you know, get into that, and so that's why I provided that one. But the rest are my designs. Okay, after using that deformer, we can go ahead and keep tweaking these with other deformers. So let's say, let's bring in the gizmo, center that. We can use something like taper. I use taper quite a bit, and you can do quick changes to the whole thing very quickly. Okay, another deformer that is super useful for this stage is called the soft deformer. So if you go to deformer soft, right, you have like this lattice with manipulators. You can actually click on these points and move things around, and it's going to give you a very soft deformer. That's why it's called the soft deformer, but it's super useful. So something I like to do, I want to keep it simple, as in not many points in this lattice, but you can increase it with these yellow controllers. So maybe if I just do this, right, so you have a few more points. You can also use the mirror option, so you can only work on one side, or you only have to work on one side, which is pretty handy, and then just start pushing and pulling these points. So if I want to make these smaller, still within that cage, but you know, super helpful. Hang on, I have 1, 2. All right, I'll just tell you in a second what I just did there. So basically with these cones, you have 2 stages. You have mirror and you have symmetry. So if you leave it at 1, it's going to mirror. If you leave it at 2, it's going to actually use the symmetry that you might be used to. So mirror is just going to take 1 point and mirror exactly the same distance on the other side. So it's gonna, if you push it, let's say positive 1, a value of +1, then the other side is gonna push it towards that as well. So it's gonna be a -1. So in other words, if I leave this at 1, you'll see this point that I moved to the right, right? ZBrush is taking this other point on the other side and it's pushing it with it. If I do symmetry, it's actually doing it towards the center line. So that's kind of like a good thing to keep in mind. But as you can see, this is it's a very simple process to fine-tune the shape of this initial state of the mecha. And the rounded shape that we have here is gone, right? We're not gonna rely on this just to keep it perfectly aligned. So let's go ahead and accept that. We're gonna do a quick save. Let's see the chat. Chris, okay, thank you. I sent you a message on Twitter about him. I'll have to check. Don't recall seeing that. Cool. All right, so let's see how this looks with the other stuff. Maybe it is definitely too big, so we can go ahead and scale this down, and then just play again with the positioning of the head. All right, and you can use the same thing for the bottom areas or any other area that you want. What I'm going to do now is dynamesh all this and start, defining some of the main shapes again. So for that, I'm going to go into solo mode. I'm going to change the material, and let's just dynamesh this with a relatively high resolution for now. I'm going to use the polish by features. Make sure symmetry is enabled, and just do a quick smoothing process in here. All right. Actually, before I move forward, I think I'm gonna give this guy. No, let's just leave it as it is. So I'm gonna start with the damp standard brush, and I use that. This is kind of like my general process for everything to set up some markings. These are not details or anything. It's just a way to figure out how this guy is going to look really. And like I said, this process is part of the design, so a lot of the main shapes at this point would probably change anyway. So I don't get attached to anything that we did with the deformers. This is just the beginnings of this design. You just want to try to put this area here around the neck. Okay. So at least I know where the neck of the character of this piece, the head, would be. And I'm not too worried about like paneling or anything like that. This is just an indication of the difference in terms of depth of the different pieces. Is not necessarily panels. You'll see what I mean in a second, but these lines, they're not defining panels maybe. What they do is just give me an idea again to figure out what is overlapping what and that sort of thing, because that's kind of like the cool thing about this mecha stuff. I think it's one of the coolest things about designing with mechas, is all these intricate patterns and sci-fi stuff. All right, so this gives me a good start. I can go ahead now and bring in the move brush with AccuCurve, so I hit a very pointy area. And what this is going to allow me to do is concentrate on pushing things very sharply. And again, don't worry necessarily about how it's gonna end up looking, because we're gonna change all that. So I'm not too concerned about how much this is changing from the original shape that we created with the deformers. Also with the mask lasso, we can maintain some of these pieces, so we can go ahead and, I don't know, do something like this, just to mask this area, and then push this with the move brush. And do the same thing here for the head. Oops, forgot I had symmetry enabled. But again, super loose stuff. In fact, this looks very, very organic at the moment. But we'll get there. Patience. With the gizmo, we can push this back a bit. So really, all I'm doing is masking pieces, and with the move brush, moving them in place. Nothing fancy. Just keeping the whole process of this at this stage simple and with the least amount of brushes is probably a good idea. And of course, we can use alphas later on for extra details and all that. But for now, I think keeping it simple, just reducing your tool set to the move brush. Pretty much what I show in the 5-day challenge. You know, choose your tools, keep it simple, and then try to limit your tool set so that you get to know the tools that you're exploring. And then of course you're gonna find a very specialized tool for specific things. I'm gonna quick dynamesh this at this point, and let's go ahead and bring in the clay brush, not the clay builder brush, the clay brush. And this brush is extremely useful for hard surface modeling, because you know, you can use the alt option here. For example, if I want to push this in, I just press alt, and it's just going to give me a very clean indentation. So this is kind of like a sketching, but with the idea in mind that this is going to be a mecha. So everything that has to do with the polishing, that will come after, because there's no way of, I mean, there's ways, but there's no point of me trying to keep all of these edges super clean and all that, since this is just a dynamesh object. We'll deal with that afterwards. The way that I would do or approach this mecha stuff and the hard surface character stuff would be basically as any other creature, an organic shape. And like I said, it's depending on what I want, but it's about the polishing, how you polish this later on. This is kind of like setting up the foundations, making sure that the shapes are working fine, and this becomes kind of like a blueprint, and then you start polishing on top of this, or separating pieces, you know, adding all that. So it's a process that takes maybe a little bit longer than any other more organic stuff, just because, I mean, if you're not used to it, and just because the polishing might take a little bit longer. But it's the same thing, or I think it should be the same thing. You might have a different approach, but in my personal opinion, I think the approach of setting this up should be exactly the same as you know, organic stuff. Just because the principles of design, how you applied the balance of the shapes and the forms is the same thing. You still have to figure out how to place details and making sure that it's not overriding or it's not too much in certain areas, and keep an eye on those things. So it is, for me at least, the same, exact same thing. One of the things that I like to do with this type of mecha stuff is, or that helps me figure out shapes and how things interconnect, is to use a lot of the alt key in this case, or embedding the effect of the brushes. So that gives me a lot of suggestions as to how this all is going to be interconnected. So this one, I'm not a fan of this area here, so I'm just gonna chip that away and work on the center part here. And this looks like the mouth, so, and I'm not happy with that, so I'm just gonna remove that. I'm going to try to avoid humanoid features, as in having a very distinctive set of two eyes or mouth or a nose. And I kind of like this very pronounced forehead for the helmet, so I'm going to exaggerate this quite a bit. So far I've only used of course the deformers to set up the main shapes, then the move brush with the smooth brush, and the damp standard brush to set up these lines. And now all I'm doing is using the clay brush to push and pull things, and you know, it's very blobby, but that's part of the process. That's the idea, you know, keeping everything very loose so that you don't get attached to any stuff that, you know, you can change. Changing things here is so easy. So for instance here, this is very, let's say, very balanced in terms of how the designs are placed. So I like to push things more than that. So I'm going to take all of these and push them down, and that's just going to make a more interesting design, I think, and balance things out a bit. So just with a larger brush size, just redefining some of these shapes. So you'll see these changes quite a bit over time. And if you want to have a look at, again, just get an insight into my thinking or design process, one of the streams that we did a few weeks ago, maybe last year even, was the Wilbert character. So that one took about 3 streams, I think. And in that one, I go through entirely the same process of defining that, and that's just a creature, right? But yeah, we talked about, you know, how it is important not to get attached to something. And if you're designing in 3D, if you're not following a concept necessarily, and you're just trying to define your design in ZBrush, it's important to not get attached to, you know, to these forms. And that particular character changed a lot since the very beginning. So that might give you another idea of how to approach this or any other creature stuff. All right, let me see the chat. How do you get the deformer menu? So if you go to the Gizmo 3D and click on the cog icon, just select the deformer that you want, and it will give you the menu. So every deformer has its own set of tools, so it will be different per each deformer. Hey, Mr. Sanson, how's it going? Good to have you here. Hey, Jose. Is there a way to export a material from ZBrush to like Maya? You can export matcaps. Yeah, you can export matcaps, as in you can export the images used as matcaps, if that's what you mean. So that is super easy. You can go to the material palette. You know what? There's a few processes for that. What I'll do is tomorrow I'll show you in the extra mile in the class. I'll show you how to do that. Just remember to write it in the comments of the private stream, and I'll get to that. And the VR sculpting is doing good. This week I'm gonna release the first video. But if you wanna have an insight on the whole process again, we already did that. I don't know if you got to that in the extra mile. So there is one class about that. Just go back to the archive and you'll see it there. Is there anyone who teaches high realistic model? Yeah, there's a lot of people doing that. Sorry, Mr. Sanson, could you flash your reference? So I have this guy that I'll just paste it in here. So this is the kind of like the idea that I'm going for. It's not necessarily the same thing, but it's something that we did at the beginning of the stream. So if you wanna rewatch that, I did that within the quick sketch in ZBrush, so you can use that. Alrighty. So yeah, I think this is working, but there's some lines that I'm not a fan of. So I'm just gonna go with the clay brush. I'm just gonna refine those. And you know what? We can bring in the damn standard brush again and just try to define a little bit more of that idea that I have in the reference, which is kind of like this circular shape in there. That's kind of like an indication of a mouth as well, but it's not too bad. So I'm just gonna refine some of these edges so that I can push things even further. All right. So let's go ahead and hold the control option. So actually, I'm gonna do it with this piece here. And when you use the lasso, the mask lasso, just be careful because it works with the camera. So if you move things around, if you rotate around, you'll have the same masking on this side. So just be careful with that. But again, all of this is super loose because we're not trying to define anything just yet, as in refine or polish anything. So I'm just gonna take my move brush. I'm gonna push this forward. And I think those two pieces should be separate anyway, but again, we'll get to that. This is kind of like some kind of piece that will hold the other piece. Some hinges or something like that. I don't know. All right, something like that. And I think we need the same thing for this area. So I'm just gonna go ahead and straight away get something going with the mask. And just push this out of the way. And with the clay builder brush, we can just add or flatten areas as well, or add volume. So that's another thing that is really good about the clay brush, that it flattens areas really nicely as well, and you have the pressure control. So all right, so that started to look a little bit better. This is definitely going to be receding a bit more. All right, so before I go and start like flooding and adding pieces, because this definitely is going to need some pieces, I'm gonna check this in comparison with the rest of the design that we haven't actually touched. So for the neck, I'm gonna do the same thing, just going to dynamesh it. In fact, let's dynamesh the neck with the torso. So I'm gonna combine these and I'm gonna dynamesh that. So now this is a dynamesh object with symmetry. I'm gonna smooth this out. And with the move brush and AccuCurve, I'm gonna do the same thing, just trying to place this in a way that kind of like makes sense for the shape and the size of this helmet. All right. Again, super simple, but we can then go ahead and bring in the damp standard brush, and I'll show you a different approach with this area, with this torso. So I'm gonna redynamesh with a large resolution. So we have plenty of points to push. So I'm gonna do the same thing, try to follow a little bit of the design. Again, not super concerned about it just yet, because all of this is going to change. And again, at this point, I'm sort of thinking about the functionality, but all of that is going to be revised later on. Some indication of the scapula here, or what it could be, the scapula. All right, so with this technique, just like using these very loosely, you see in a matter of seconds you have something that sort of works or that at least resembles kind of like a mecha thing. From the distance you see, oh yeah, there's some panels, so this is a mecha. But you can use also the clip builder brush, and that will create volumes really quickly. So I'm gonna use that for the neck areas here. But you can also use the technique that I showed you before with the masking. This is just another one that is a little bit more sculptural. That yeah, but it's the same thing. And of course, let's bring in the clay brush, and I'm gonna just refine this a bit, just so that the silhouette is more interesting and sort of makes sense. And there's gonna be hopefully a lot of tubing that we can do, the panels as well. So again, this is all very sketchy. We will refine all of these later on. So going over the clay builder brush with the clay brush, not only you keep the volume and add a little bit more volume, but you also sort of like polish that shape and get rid of sort of this alpha that comes with the clay builder brush. So it's pretty handy. And again, you can hold the Alt key to sort of flatten certain areas. All right, this is starting to get a little bit blobby. We'll bring some tools to fix that in a second. I want to refine some of the stuff with the. You can use the damp standard brush, but you can also use the slash brush. So the slash brush, the slash 3 brush is also pretty good to this to do this, just to define some lines of what could be panels. And after defining this, we can simply go ahead and figure it out and see if it actually works with the design. I'm gonna go into solo mode here. Also, at this point, I'm not necessarily thinking about the materials, although I have an idea as I create or define these pieces a bit more. I start to get an idea of which ones could be kind of like rubbery, which ones would be more of a hard surface, you know, metal stuff. But all of that can change quite easily. This one here looks like a face. Like the nose, 2 eyes, and the mouth. That's ridiculous. Let's get rid of that. I'm gonna make a simple plate here. This is where we start to design things and see, all right, this is like maybe too much plating, too much things going on. So I'm gonna make a large plate here for the chest area. Bring in the damp standard brush. All right, that was a drastic change in there, but hopefully it would read better and provide some areas of rest for the eyes as well. So I'm just gonna push things in a bit. So you see, this is a very organic process, although the idea is to make a hard surface stuff, but very organic. At least the discovery process is very organic, I think. All right, I'm going to show you another technique that's really cool to evaluate this this stuff. Let's see. I think the title of this stream is wrong. Yeah, I think I think I'm Shane Olsen at the moment. How do you practice hard surface modeling? Because I'm a beginner and learning myself. This is for me a practice, what I'm doing right now. So again, as I said at the beginning, it's just trying to get into the mindset that when you apply the design and when you start practicing the volumes, the shapes, the forms, the main shapes, that's what I think it matters. The details, the alphas, and all that for hard surface modeling, it's very easy once you get to that point. Is how you polish it. So concentrating on forms, especially if you are a beginner, is crucial. So concentrating on making sure that the main shapes read well. So from the distance, that it makes sense, that it sort of like follows, the design. And if you're copying, which I also recommend as well, just trying to replicate something, even something very, very simple. I did a class ages ago where I taught how to create an apple. So it was extremely simple, but some of the simplest things could be very, very hard to replicate. So if you just take an apple and try to make it exactly like that apple, just try to make it hyper realistic with all the inside outs, all the little imperfections and everything, then you'll learn a lot, right? Rather than trying to create something extremely complex, you might get frustrated. So as a beginner, I think that's a good approach. And if you want to get better at hard surface modeling as a beginner as well, I will take something super simple like a Rubik's Cube. Try to do something like that. Hey Cal, we're trying to figure out. Would like to see. Okay, cool. So yeah, so if you guys go to that link that Kyle just sent, that would help to figure out the content is, the content. Okay, cool. All right. High polish brush is better than clay brush for hard surface, or depending how you use it. I'm not sure what you mean. What is the the H polish brush? Yeah, the H polish brush brush is great for hard surface. That's something that I use often, and I'm gonna use it. At the moment, I'm not too worried about that. I'm not setting up the planes. I'm more concerned about the overall shape. Like I should be just looking at this guy kind of like in a very dark mode, so that I can evaluate the silhouette. But in fact, let me just restore my custom UI. With the new ZBrush 2020, I can see silhouette. It's just that you guys, the chat is over there, so I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna turn off the camera and the thumbnail. Or we can create a custom cam view. So let's do that, because that's a pretty fun thing to do when you're designing this type of thing. So I'm gonna select a black background, and you can use these gray material, but I have my custom material that for this type of things looks really good, as in it enhances all of these lines. This is the material that I use for the comic style. You can get that for free as well in the ZBrush guides. And I'm gonna go to the preference cam view, click on make cam view. Cool. And now it should have we should have now a cam view that has a transparent background, because anything that is black, ZBrush is going to interpret as transparency. So let's go back to what we had. So now we have this character, but when we rotate around, we have a reference here on the top right of exactly the same thing that we're working on, so we can look at it from different angles, and then we can compare it with this. So just by looking at this, I want to change a few things on the body and the neck as well. So one thing you can do, or another technique that I wanted to show you, is the move elastic. So if you go to the move brushes and you select the move elastic, this one is going to give you a pretty harsh or strong result, or strong effect. So this one is really good to explore shapes. So I use this quite a bit to refine volumes really quickly, and especially the silhouette. Just trying to find something that looks more interesting. Both for the neck and the head, I should do that. And with this brush, you can also enable the AccuCurve, so you get a very pointy shape. If you're doing something, something like that, that would work nicely. But just by doing this with subtle movements, it just keeps everything very sharp. Like some of the corners, whatever you pull from a corner is going to be very, very sharp. That is essentially the idea. All right, so hopefully you can see a little bit of the difference between what I just did there and the cam view that we created. I'm gonna do the same thing for the head. I feel like I should make it a bit more rounded, and I'm having second thoughts about this piece here, kind of like the alien effect. So I'm just gonna bring it back. And this is also a part of the process, of the design process, that I really enjoy in terms of figuring out or learning about yourself a little bit, because as soon as you start designing something or creating, you know, your own concepts or your own things, the first iterations, the first ideas that will come to your head are most likely just cliches or things that, you know, you're basically regurgitating your a visual library that you're constantly acquiring. So every time, every day, as you move around or as you go through your life, you will collect a series of images that when you get to design, you're probably just accessing those very recent memories. I mean, I have no scientific basis for this. This is just my, like, what I feel like empirically that I've been learning. So like, for example, I see, I don't know, walking down the street, I see like a really weird flower, and I look at it and I go, oh, that's cool for something, and then come back the other day and I completely forgot about that reference, but then I start working on something that looks very similar, and that is the case for, you know, at least at the beginning of the design stages. I don't know if that makes sense or if you can relate to that. I just thought I mention it, and because that's kind of like what I did there, you know, like I intuitively go for that, you know, more alien type of, you know, that looks very cool, but it could be a cliche, it could be something like an easy, kind of like a safe place, right, to design something that looks cool like that. Probably the same thing for this centerpiece, but I think it looks cool anyway. So I'm not saying that completely abandon references that you might have collected. I'm just saying that the more you iterate, the more that you design, I think that's a real power on that, to create something original and also develop your, you know, your observation skills on your own and your own design, and also self-assessment. I think that's super important to grow as an artist, being able to say, you know what, this is not working or this is working well, or also accept when things are working fine. I'm going to do a couple things. I think what I'll do now is I'm gonna use the insert brushes. Before I go into any other brush, I'm gonna go to primitive. I'm gonna select a cylinder, just drop it in here. And again, this is just to have a quick reference of, whoops, of this area, just to keep it true to the shapes. So if I want to keep this as a cylindrical shape, I mean, you can eyeball it all you want, but there's nothing better than just having a reference there. Actually, let me just split this, split hidden, so that I don't affect the actual shape, and then I can just keep working on top of this. I mean, this part of the jaw is definitely too pushed backwards, but I kind of like it. So what I'll do is I'm gonna redefine the jaw, or what the jaw might be. So more like that. Let's say if you go for a humanoid character, but I'm still gonna leave this shape here. I'm gonna work on that later on. I think it looks cool. So I don't know if you have noticed, but the amount of times that I've been redefining the certain volumes and certain lines is, you know, I already lost count of how many times I've done that, and that is part of the process, I think. Just focusing on the shapes, because if I start adding details and if I start working on trying to figure out how these, you know, planes and plates actually work, I'm gonna do a Dynamesh there. Then I'm just gonna waste time with some technicalities and not concentrated on the design. If you already have a design that you're happy with and you're just following a concept from someone else, it might be just easier to just start with a clean mesh and work your way up. But in this case, I'm following an idea that I made at the beginning of the stream, but it's not it's not set in stone. I'm also designing as I go. The little sketch that I do at the beginning is purely to get a reference or something to aim for. I'm gonna go with the clay brush, push this thing in, try to make this just a single piece here. And probably push this one as well. These pieces here, I'm not a fan of these. They're just like cubes, but you know what, let's just smooth this out and work on this a little bit better. I still don't know what this could be, but I just know that it could be something to hold the visor or the main plate of this helmet. So cool. I think I like that. I mean, I like the kind of like an indentation here. I'm going to increase the dynamics resolution a tiny bit more so that when I redynamish, we have more room to play with. All right, and I'm going to bring in. Also, I try to stay away from very quickly, when I undo all that, very quickly getting into the clay brush, sorry, into the H polish, which is definitely something that we're going to be using. Probably not this stream, just because, I mean, that one is a great tool to define things and keep planes. But if I do it with the clay brush, it sort of forces me to focus on the volumes a little bit more. Because if I do the H polish, let me give you an example. Let's say this piece right here is pretty well defined, as in, well, not well defined, but you can sort of tell what the shape is and all that. If I bring in the H polish now, and I just start doing this, I'm gonna get a great sharp piece that looks really cool from the distance and even closer and all that. But I'm kind of like losing that blobbiness and that volume that at this stage I think is really helpful to keep an eye on how one piece interact with each other. I don't know if that makes like real sense. Like, I'm not saying that is a necessary step of the process. I personally find it really useful, so that's why I haven't got to the H polish. That's not to say that the H polish is not going to be used. The H polish is the next step for me, but keeping the clay brush, the clay or the clay builder brush allows me to work and refine out the volumes a little bit better, because again, we're still designing, we're not getting into the what's the name, the polishing state. I might have to revisit all of these pieces because I'm not a fan of that. Just gonna do a smoothing of all this and maybe go with the damp sander brush and redefine this a bit better. So I do like this, sort of this effect, that we can have some bolts or something like that in that area. I do like that, but the rest is not working for me. Okay, I think I have an idea for this part. Oh, show you in a second what I'm thinking. So I'm just refining this a bit more. So I'm gonna give this a tiny bit more volume so that I can perform the next step, which is just a quick boolean. I mean, we can do it now, we can do it later, doesn't matter. But basically, we can have a boolean here and another one here with cylinders, and that should fix the problem a little bit. But this area, just keep an eye on this area because I'm going to change it. Maybe not now, but when we get to the more of a polishing state. And also the back of this helmet that we pushed in, we need to refine that as well. So let's go ahead and do that with the clay brush. So here we can have some sort of pieces where we can have some tubes or something connecting here at the back later on. I'm gonna go into solo mode and refine these pieces. Also, what's the other one that I was using? The /3, right? The /3. Maybe with a smaller brush size, now that we have more geometry. All right, let me see the chat. Hey Seth, welcome to the stream. Hey Seth, where are you? Where do I work? So I have a studio, and I also freelance, and I also teach online. So I just split my time between freelancing for different clients, my studio, and with my studio and the teaching part. Comics Legend, my problem with the initial concept is know when to commit to a change and moving forward. What helps you decide commit to a certain look and or a deadline. So with that, I guess there's no a straight answer for that really. If you're designing something in 3D and you have no time limit, you can just do as many things as you want, and you keep finding things to fix, and it's just like a never-ending process. If you have a deadline, then you'll have to commit at some point to do something, right? But there's no straight answer. I would say that if you have a time limit, do as much as you can in the kind of like pre-production stage. So do as many sketches as you can. Anything that makes easier the iteration process for yourself. It doesn't have to be ZBrush. If you feel more comfortable with Photoshop, like I could take this as a screenshot, like right now, as it is right now, bring it into Photoshop, and then just figure out things maybe a little bit faster than in ZBrush, or like in a front view, for example. Now the symmetry that Photoshop has, you can also paint over and figure things out before you commit to those changes. So again, not a straight answer, but I would commit once I'm happy with the design. And the only way that I sort of get, or maybe not happy, but comfortable enough to move forward, is by making sure that I do enough iterations that I can compare, and enough iterations for myself, that then I can go and say, you know what, this is working, this one is not working. I like the head of number 1, I like the body of number 2. What happened if I combine them? And so on and so forth. And that gives me the confidence to commit to move forward, just because I have gone through that process of designing. I don't know if that makes any sense or if I answered the question, but that is just my approach. Hey Pablo, I have to. Okay, no worries, Francisco. See you later. I'll see you tomorrow. It is a single polygroup, the head and the body, or are you gonna separate different parts and polygroups? Yes. So I don't know. Yeah, we have some polygroups that were the result of the beginning, but it's not. It's not It's a separate mesh. So we have the head. We have these tubes that I'm using as reference, and the body as separate meshes. The polygroups don't really matter right now. I'm just sketching. This is clay for me, and then when we start refining this a bit more, of course, we can look into separating pieces and using other tools that allows you to work a little bit cleaner. But at this point, we're trying to figure out the design really. So I'm just refining some edges in there. I think I'm going to, just for now, with a clay polish, I'm just gonna push this in thing here. And the only reason I'm doing this at this point right now is because from the side view, I want to make sure I have a better shape or a better line here. And also you see that I'm looking at this helmet or at this guy from every possible angle and just working from that angle, not just from the top view. And that also helps to maintain that idea of like all the pieces having some kind of like good relation with each other. If you look at the design always from the right view, as in, if you're working from the design like this and then like that and then like this and then like this and then like this, it becomes you can fall very easily into something that it could look really good, but it really helps to kind of like reset your own eyes and your brain if you work like in completely different view, right? So I'm just looking at this guy from the bottom up, like hanging from the ceiling, and yeah, that sort of helps to keep an eye on certain volumes that otherwise you might have missed if you work always on the same angle. And I think that is just because you get used to it, or you assume something would be fine. So for example, from this angle, maybe the chin is a little bit too narrow, so I'm going to push it forward. And the same thing with the neck. I'm going to push this forward as well. And of course, this as well from this view, I feel like the shoulders are a bit too low. So those are the type of little workflow tips that I like to share with you guys, because it might not be something that everyone uses, but I've personally found certain things like this that are kind of like unspoken rules or unspoken tips of the process that you sort of like learn as you get more experience, I guess, and explore different things. So I like to share those because hopefully they speed up the process as well and give you an insight on how to maybe better your or improve your work as well. Hopefully that is the whole idea, right, of doing these live things. All right, I think this is working a little bit. I mean, from the distance you can tell. I kind of like the head tilted forward, but maybe it is too much. I'm gonna take the body and push this forward. Maybe rotate the head a tiny bit. All right. How are we with time? We have about half an hour, so we can refine this a little bit more. The body, maybe that we haven't actually spent too much time with it. So this area, I want to have some kind of like tubes, like I said, going in. So maybe we can take advantage of some of these pieces, these volumes that we have already established. Just with the clay brush to do something like this is pretty easy. Let's push this in. So with the smooth brush, I mean, I already defined these areas with the, I think it was the, what was it? /3D, /3, and although there were like initially volumes sticking out, I think I prefer this to be kind of like pushed in a bit more. And of course, we can go ahead and refine all of this. And yeah, at this point, I'm starting to think a little bit more about the functionality of the design. How, like for instance, this feels like a hard area as well as this plate. So it would be pretty hard for this guy to move his arms forward. So just starting to think about those things and how to, fix those or find a quick solution for that. So just removing that corner here for the plate, for the chest plate, and adding a bit of a rounded shape here for this, what could be on top of the deltoid, kind of like a plate as well. And maybe he has some kind of like gear exposed in this area. That'll be cool. I'm gonna bring in the slash curve again, like the /3, just to carve this in a bit more. After you get the concept you're happy with, do you retopologize in order to get a sharper, more refined edge, or do you keep sculpting ZBrush to refine the shapes? You can do both. If it is just going to be a concept, which I reckon this guy is just going to be a quick concept, yeah, you can do that. If you want to get into the more technical aspect of this process, you can also retopologize, of course, and get cleaner shapes and play around with crease edges and all those sort of things, which is totally valid. As soon as I get into that sort of more technical process, I completely divorce myself from the creative aspect. So I would do that if I have to, or sometimes I would just do it just because it is the right thing for the process. But at this stage, when I'm still designing and figuring out how everything works, I wouldn't even think about retopologizing. Of course, there's different, there are a few different tools that you can use. You don't have to do a perfect retopology to create something that is very decent to work with, or very decent to present or keep moving forward. Is depending as well on what the outcome is, what do you wanna get out of it. So is it gonna be put into a render engine that, like a Keyshot or Maverick, which is an awesome renderer that I've been playing around lately with, and it's really, really fantastic. Or if you want to take it into a game environment, of course, then you definitely probably need to go to the retopology route. But it's those sort of things that start to come in when you decided when you're trying to decide how to polish this. I'm gonna bring in the damp standard, and I'm gonna start with the Alt key. Also, I'm gonna redynamesh quickly. I'm just going to start refining those edges with the Alt key and the normal effect. And I switch between the brushes as well because I sometimes see areas that need refinement, or that I need to change the, maybe this is not a very pointy area, but rather kind of like a curvature here. And there's some visibility of the of the fabric, or something like a rubber piece or something that goes in there. Okay, it is more difficult to retopple a hard surface character, or more or less the same. I find it easier, just because, I mean, it's more time consuming, I think, but it's a little bit easier just because the edges, or the main flow of the topology, is kind of like already there, right? Like if you wanna, for example, retopologize this area in here, right? You probably, what? Hang on. RGB. Okay. Hang on. Again, so if you want to retopologize this edge here, right, you probably already have the idea of how to follow. So you start cutting things that follow that edge, and then just connect things like that. So it really depends, but I find it easier to just at least don't have to think about the topology much, because I kind of like already know what tools, or what edges, for example, would be useful in that area. So I don't know if that makes sense, but when you're thinking about retopology, it's about simplifying a shape, right? And trying to maintain the primary shapes, or the volume, as accurate as possible. And then when you subdivide, that it also maintains that shape. So yeah, I find it to be easier. I think I need to work on the chest plate, or these areas here, a bit more, because they're too low. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna take this, which I like, just protect it with a mask. I also kind of like this area here, so I'm gonna protect that as well. Oops. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and push this up. So that it sort of suggests a bit of a, I don't know, it could be the clavicle in a way. But at least I'd have more room to play with the pectoral area. So just define that a little bit more. So I'm gonna clear that and redynamesh, obviously, because I did a mess in there. And now we have more room to add more details here. So I'm gonna bring in the clay brush again. Whoops, what is that? Clay brush, texture. There we go. I'm gonna reset my brushes. I don't know what I did there. So you see, there's a lot of back and forth between these, you know, in this design process. So I'm not a fan of this part either. Thing is not necessarily flowing right. So I keep just changing all that, because again, we'll have to commit at some point if we want to move forward and polish this. But you know, we have about 20 more minutes, so I'm happy to just keep playing with the design a bit. and then we'll leave we'll start polishing on the next stream. Hopefully all of these this process is somehow useful or entertaining for you guys, because yeah, there's a lot of changes, so you might be thinking, oh yeah, it's looking okay, why did he do that? It's just, you know, things that happen when you designing. So I'm just gonna redefine this area that was kind of like working nicely with the /3. Kind of like this new pattern here that I created after I move those pieces. So sometimes obviously you get these nice happy accidents, which are pretty handy. They contribute quite a bit to the design. So it's important to do those changes to be able to, I mean, not to be afraid of making those changes, because sometimes it actually pays off more. You get those happy accidents when you start moving things and destroying what you already did, and that actually pays off. But yeah, I just want to reiterate that this design process it just takes time, but the more you do, the more confident you get, not only over time to be able to pull this off like faster, but also confident enough to move forward with a design, because you have already gone through that process of iterating and trying new things and self assessing your progress as well, and you're more confident to go for something that you know that is being going through that design process, that iteration process, and should give you a more solid basis to continue, I think. Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna leave this hole in here, but for now we can leave it. I think it's not bad. And I just want to refine the back a bit, because we push things quite a bit now. Although you probably won't see the back, but it's good to get into the habit of work on different areas, especially the ones that you're not too comfortable working. This is, I'm gonna refine this a bit. This looks more organic than anything, but we'll work on that. Yeah, so working on the things that you rarely work on is good. It's a good practice, or getting into the habit of working on the areas that you don't work. Obviously, if you're in a deadline and you have to also work smarter, so if you won't see any of that, no point sculpting it. I think, but it's good to get into the habit of really working on those things. Just thinking about this area, I want to have some kind of like tubes or pistons that would help here to pull the arms maybe. So I'm gonna expose a bit of the inside of this mecha just by adding holes in here, maybe here as well. But yeah, I kind of get lost with these changes when I'm starting to think about the design. And I actually, when I'm by myself and I'm not streaming, I kind of like sound like a crazy person. The other day I was just listening to music. I don't know what I was listening. I don't know if it has anything to do with the story, but I was listening to music, and I had my headphones, and I was just here working by myself. And my girlfriend she came into the room. Well, she was working. She arrived, and she came into the room, and I couldn't hear her because I was with my headphones, and I was designing I'm working on a kind of like a concept for kind of like a Star Wars inspired concept with a character and a droid, and I was doing the droid. And when I'm doing these things and I sort of like get into the zone and just start doing these things, I start to make like noises. Like I start to do like and just imagine how things will work in the like how could work in the real life or in the movie set or whatever. So I was working on these little areas that could have like blasters in the for the droid, and I started doing and my girlfriend came in and it's like, what are you doing? So for the outside world I look like a crazy person when I'm doing that, when I'm designing these things. So I'm just trying to keep my sanity, or like at least not show you guys how the real thing goes behind the curtains. So when I get quiet, it's just I'm suppressing myself from doing those things, because like in this area that I'm just imagining how it could work, I start doing like that sort of thing, which it helps my design process, but it could be quite annoying and stupid and also weird to watch. But anyway, that's just a funny story. I got caught. But yeah, so when I'm when I'm designing, what I was gonna say is that I tend to zone out, and even when I'm listening to music, I just don't really pay attention to it. So it could be listening to anything. I can start listening to something that I really like and I really enjoy listening, or even a very catchy tune, just so that you can, I mean, I don't know, Bohemian Rhapsody, something that for me, if it is playing, I will start singing along, right? But when I'm working, it could just it could start playing, and I'm just like working, and just it's noise, it's noise at the back of my head. Okay, I'm just refining this a bit more because this doesn't really have any any back muscles. So I'm just doing an indication of maybe the latissimus dorsi. Latissimus dorsi, some serratus and stuff like that. Just thinking about the anatomy a bit more, although it's not necessarily anatomical model, but you get the idea. It's gonna flatten this. I'll check the chat in a second. This is gonna be probably just tubes interlocking with each other, but I'm just gonna make the area where they connect, I guess. Side there. And this will be part of the rib cage, because the rib cage for this character, or what it would be the rib cage if it was a human character, it's quite tiny. There's not a lot of volume there, but again, all of these things can be fine-tuned later on when we start polishing with other brushes. All right, time check. We have about 15 minutes, so yeah, I think we can just finish polishing the initial, not polishing, finish sketching the design. And you know, we'll commit to whatever we end up with in this stream. Might not be perfect, might not be the best mecha ever, but we can start working on the polishing next stream. All right, let me just check the chat, see how we are going. Hang on. I'm gonna go with the move elastic again. And reposition some of this. I want this guy to be kind of like a thin mecha robot. And I don't know, I mean, I'm trying to follow certain anatomy landmarks, but I feel like this guy should be just a robot, just a mecha, not a human inside or anything, not like a suit. So just playing around with the proportions a bit more should give that indication. All right, let's have a look at the chat now. This is what we have so far. Looking great, thanks, Brecky. Increíble trabajo. Thank you very much, Diego. Yeah, man, I always learn from you. No worries. Thanks, Alex. Hey, Gareth. Secrets, my secrets to success. Yeah, I don't think they're secrets for success, but just some things from my experience, I guess. The secret to good designs is making the sounds. Absolutely. Pixologic should hire a Foley artist to give sound effects. Can you make a polished crisp edge deformer? I'm just curious. Not sure what you mean. You mean from the deformers from the gizmo, like a crisp edge? If there's something for that, like this crease. I'm not sure if that's what you mean. Yes, you can use the deformers for that. Probably this is gonna be too heavy for a crisp edge. I'm gonna do a quick save and try it. But that's not the process that I would follow for this mecha. And I have a feeling that these lines here are not really going with the design. They're like too polite for the rest of the design, too subtle. So I'm just gonna remove that. Sorry. Like just comparing it with the rest of the design, they really don't go along with it too nicely. They're very well refined compared to the rest. It's more chunky bits of metal and pieces, so probably not gonna work. Anyway, what was gonna okay, the creasing thing. So let me just refine this a bit more, and all of these blowiness would go away. We just need to have the volume, because that's another thing, right? What I was mentioning about going too quick into the edge polish. The edge polish is gonna flatten things, right? So we need to work on the volumes first, and then just use the edge polish to, or at least that's what I do, to flatten this, to flatten that area. Okay. I keep just looking at the guy from different angles, and I just find always things to change and to tweak. That's kind of like the curse of designing. as you as you try to get it somewhere, especially with the streams, you want to get somewhere, but then you start designing and you're like, okay, all of this could be changed. I'm just going to use the edge polish to flatten this again, just so that we can have a nice angle, sharp angle here for the silhouette. But this is what I mean, like the edge polish is great, but it will flatten that that volume, so you need to get the volumes right. I think it's very important to get the volumes, even if they look blobby at first and very sketchy, as long as the silhouette is working and you have the volumes right, then you can just spend as much time polishing those things. Anyway, what was I doing? What was it? Oh, the creasing thing, right? So in a quick sketch, with quick save, this creasing thing might not work for this model. Like, yeah, I'm a little bit afraid of using it, but let's go ahead and do that. So if you click crease, it's just not gonna do anything really. Let me just try to do it differently. So let's take this plate. And I'm not sure if this is either going to work or if that's actually what you mean for the creasing with the deformer. I wouldn't use for these type of things the deformer with the creasing, just because that's, I don't know, maybe it doesn't have enough control for me. And I'm just gonna give this a different polygroup. So it's creasing things a bit, but it's doing it by cavity. Yeah, you can do that. I just see it doesn't. It is creasing things, but this is still a Dynamesh stuff, so it's not. We'll get to this polishing, but pretty much what I'll do is if you have, I mean, this is one way to do it. Once you have polygroups, like this, you can go to the geometry palette. You can play with the edge loop as well as the creasing. So I can just do edge loop mask border. So I'm gonna select this one, mask this out. I'm gonna do edge loop. Hang on. Mask border. That's what I did. Okay, I didn't have the mask. So that just creates a poly loop around the border, and then you can just polish by groups or by features, and that should polish that. So it would retain, if you compare this thing that I just did with the rest of the mesh, it has a crisper edge because I'm polishing by features, but this plate has an edge loop all around. So that's something you can do. Also, let's just clear this up. I'm gonna do a single polygroup. You can also start working on panel loops, but again, that's another technique, probably not something that I will use. I wanna do it manually in this case. So you can have that. And I'm just gonna wrap it up with these guys because I gotta go. But you can have these groups. You can actually smooth polish groups, so that's just gonna give you a sharper line here. And then you can go to panel loops. Probably if you want to separate this piece, you can do double. If not, just turn it off, play with the thickness. I'm gonna reduce the polish and click panel loops, and that sort of gives you that more sharper panel there. But again, this is just a Dynamesh object, so if I'm happy with this, I can just re-Dynamesh, but I want to undo that. Actually, let me see something. Because that actually tightens things up a bit. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna undo all that, leave it the way I had it before, and I'm gonna use the inflate brush just to tighten all of these pieces a bit more. It's actually quite interesting. I'm gonna do the same thing for the head, just a tiny bit, and take these. Now let's just leave this as it is. We can actually use dynamic subdivision, going to the C modeler, and I'm just gonna add a couple of loops. Right? You can actually, I'm gonna undo that just to show you something else. You can hide parts of the model, and I'm gonna assign a different polygroup and do the same thing here. Different polygroup. So now I have two different polygroups for the caps, or to the ends of these cylinders, and you can enable dynamic subdivision, and then you can go to under the edge loop panel. You have this bevel option that is going to bevel the difference in the polygroups. So I can bevel this, crease polygroups, bevel, and then you can play with the width of that and the resolution, how sharp this you want it to be. So this is a pretty cool way to just get something quick going, or you can do it manually. But that's it. Probably I want to add a new one here, and not just to close it to the center, so that we don't have those artifacts of the concentric points of the triangles visible in there. Leave that as a dynamic subdivision, and we have like a softer version here. And just to wrap it up, I'm gonna do something here as well. So let's bring in, let's go for this shape, and I'm dragging it within this other mesh that has dynamic subdivision enabled. That's why it looks like this. We'll come back to this, but this is good to have as a quick reference. If I go to solo mode, we'll probably want to add a few edge loops here to sharpen that edge. And this is just topology that we're using as a reference, but if we needed to, we can just use it to be the final piece. We'll have to just think about that later, but that gives us something. I think this is definitely too thick. Something we can do is either use the inflate brush, or I can very quickly tag all of these polygons here, and the ones here as well. So I'm just holding the Alt key with the C modeler to tag those polygons, and then I can click, hold Shift, and then I will just move that in the kind of like the normals of the polygons. Hang on. Forgot to do the other side. All right, so now that I have tagged all the inside of those polygons, I have Q mesh selected, so I'm gonna click, hold Shift, and then just push that in there. All right, clear the mask, go into dynamic, solo, let's go back to the move brush. So now I have this as a quick reference, and of course we can continue editing whatever is surrounding this piece. but now that we know it's kind of like a perfect circle or a perfect you know, a symmetrical radial shape in a way, we know how to tweak this around this edge. So it's good to have these pieces as reference so that you can sort of stay true to the actual shape. So for example, this one here, we probably want to have the same thing around there, just because this is not a cylindrical shape, but we'll probably do that later on with booleans, I think. Again, just to wrap it up, I know I said I was going to wrap it up with that, but we can have something for like a lens type of thing. So let's just do an insert sphere here. Hang on, in the here. So we already have dynamic. I'm gonna squish it in the z-axis and try to rotate it into place. So yeah, there's gonna be some kind of lens in there. All right, I'm gonna clear that mask. Go back to the move brush. Do a quick save. And let's check the chat. I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys. I went over the time, so hopefully it's not gonna be a problem. Kind of reminds me of Metal Gear Robot. Yeah, yeah, I didn't play that, so sorry. I used to play Metal Gear, the very old version of Metal Gear, so I don't know if it is similar. But yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed today's stream. There's a lot of things that we can keep going and keep playing with the design, but I think I'm gonna leave it there. Maybe in the next stream we're gonna do some fine tuning of the design, refine some shapes, and then get into the polishing of this sketch. I'm gonna do a quick render here. But yeah, otherwise I think I'm gonna leave it here, guys, and in the next stream we're gonna go over this. If you're interested in VR or concepting in VR as well, just before I go, I'm going to send, if you're part of my email list as well, I'm gonna send you an email, probably not today, maybe tomorrow. I'll try to do it today, because I'm gonna launch the blog of the 3D Concept Artist website, and that one is gonna have a few other tools and other tutorials that are they're not necessarily, the focus is not ZBrush, but it's a nice set of tools, a set of complementary tools for ZBrush workflow. So like I said, I'm gonna release the first video on an introductory series to Gravity Sketch that I've been playing around with, a VR sketching software, and I'm using this quite a bit to create some quick concepts. It's very, very quick, very intuitive, and then you bring it into ZBrush and then continue the design process in there, or the the tweaking and the refine process. So definitely something worth having a look at if you're interested in that. So yeah, if you're interested in that, keep an eye on your email. I will send you a link there, and I'll also share it on the social media. So if you follow me on any of these things in here in the social media stuff, I'll put a link in there to the video, to the blog. So hopefully you guys find it useful. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. And if Brecky, Jose, or the other extra milers are here, I'll see you tomorrow in the private community. See you guys.